Okay, Ash, you made a suggestion to me a couple of weeks ago. You said there's a gentleman that we need to contact.
Well, I believe it was you who turned me on to his op-ed concerning the UAB situation.
Well, yeah, that's right. The op-ed was headlined, "Cheer UAB's Courageous Leadership in Exiting Football." Guest opinion, John Gerdy. I knew John. John's probably forgotten me 6 times. I was the flunky with Feinbaum. That's how most people remember me. Sycophant, okay? But John served as Associate Commissioner of the Southeastern Conference 1989 to 1995, NCAA 1986-89. He's got a new book. So, Ash, you just take it. Ball or Bands, Football versus Music as an Educational and Community Investment. Okay? Book's just been released.
Well, is it? I guess, yeah.
Now, you're going to introduce John.
I am. Is he online?
Yes, John's there.
I am.
John, good to talk to you finally. I feel like we've been trading emails for the better part of a month.
Well, it's great. It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I guess before we jump into it and before we talk sort of everything and about the UAB situation, I guess, why don't you take a minute and just tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the organizations that you're involved with?
Well, you preface most of it. I mean, as a former All-American basketball player at Davidson College and played some in the Continental Basketball Association, so played and got paid for it. So I'm, my father was a high school football coach. I worked at the NCAA, at the Southeastern Conference. You could say that I'm a product of the system, and believe very strongly in athletics' potential to as an educational tool. And but I was at the SEC until 1995, and with the birth of our first child, I left the SEC to be a stay-at-home parent, and that's when I began writing in earnest about the role of sport in our culture and in our educational system. And my current book, Ball or Bands, Football versus Music as an Educational and Community Investment, is my 5th book. And in the meantime, about 8 years ago, I founded and I continue to run as executive director a music-related nonprofit organization called Music for Everyone. And you can find out about all of this stuff, my background in Music for Everyone. And I'm also a lifelong musician at johngerdy.com, JOHNGERDY .com. So that's sort of my background. I've had a foot in both worlds, athletics and music. But more than anything, people ask me, well, why'd you go from athletics to music? And to me, that's not a very far jump at all, because what I've always been interested in, it's never really been about athletics. And it's really not so much about music. What it is to me, it's about education. And in both cases, what drew me to be involved in college athletics and what draws me to be involved in Music for Everyone is that I believe that these are both tools to supplement the educational process. So it's really not been about the games or really not about the concerts. It's about the process. And that both of these activities can be tremendous resources in helping to supplement the educational process of our children. Although I do believe that when we can discuss how, but the evolution of sport in America, particularly elite athletics, has really, really sort of changed the dynamic in terms of its effectiveness as an educational tool. And meanwhile, the environment within which, the expectations for what constitutes an education worthy of the 21st century have changed dramatically as well. And a lot of those changes, in my mind, have sort of shifted the relative value of football versus music as an educational tool to where I believe that when you're really, or if you're honest about it and you really look closely at it, that it's clear that music is a much better you get a much better educational return on dollar investing in music programs than you do in football programs. And this book concentrates at the junior high and high school level.
Well, and it's like you said. I mean, this is your fifth book, and it doesn't appear from looking at the track record of the books that you started off with music versus bands or music versus sports as a topic. It looks like you started really looking at the impact of sports in education, and then how that transitions from even a small level to the elite level. And then I guess when you hit the pinnacle and you realize how much money and time and everything is being spent, if you'll say that, to keep a program at the elite level, and you compare that with the cost and the return on investment of music, I guess a book of this nature almost sort of jumps out glaringly to some degree.
Yeah, I think it's very timely. This is the thing about and the reason why I choose football is because it's the white elephant in the room. It's consumes by far the largest amount of resources and time, effort, energy, and emotion. And but my concern about sport in America, and particularly sport within our educational institutions, is that the primary justification for including sport in our educational systems is because it's about education. It supplements the educational process. Okay. The problem is, though, that with the increased amount of media attention, increased money involved, increased pressure to win, I believe it's evolved to a point where it's become much less effective as an educational tool. In other words, it's become more about the end result, meaning winning or some kid moving on to the next level, than the process, which is education. Okay, so as the pressure to win, as the money's become involved, as that has accelerated or risen, I think it correspondingly has negatively impacted its ability, its potential as an educational tool. And you know what? I wouldn't really have much of a problem with that, other than the fact that the primary justification we use for sponsoring football and elite athletics in our school systems is, first and foremost, that it is an positive educational tool. And I think we've sort of lost perspective on that. And therefore, its value as an educational tool has diminished over the years. And all I'm asking in this book, or trying to get people to think about, is that, the standards for what we, what constitute, and expectations of what constitutes an education worthy of the 21st century are rising dramatically. At the same time, resources are becoming more scarce. Every dollar is increasingly important. So all I'm trying to do with this book is to get education leaders, parents, school board members, the media, to take a step back and really take an honest look at how we spend our dollars in the area of extracurricular activities, and really, do a thorough, not an analysis that's just based on, anecdotal evidence, but also data-driven analysis. And the stakes are too high in our educational system. We simply can't continue to make decisions and continue to sponsor things and expend energy, emotion, and resources on activities just because we've always done it that way. The world's changing so dramatically that we really do have to step back and do a critical analysis of every dollar we spend and ask the question, are these activities doing the things they're supposed to be doing? And if not, how can we change them, or what can we do, or do we need to invest in something else? And that's what this book is about.
Well, now, is it as simple as leveling the pace, leveling the differences between the money put into music versus the money put into education? Or is it more about reclassifying what we use sports for? Because you're familiar with the UAB situation around here. One of the impacts that has been discussed pretty openly around here is that UAB's decision to abolish football is going to have a radical impact on the marching band and the music program at UAB as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, to some degree it will, but I still believe that was I know has been some debate and there's concern in the the UAB community about how the decision was made. This isn't about that at all. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter to me how the decision was made. That's something that the UAB community has to deal with within the UAB community. I believe that because of certain changes that are going on, and if you sort of project out the future of major college athletics, there are some trends there that are really, really going to make it difficult for schools like UAB. And for example, I went to a graduate school at Ohio University, which is in the Mid-American Conference. They're sort of in the same boat. What happened, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago or so, is that the NCAA, at the threat of really the 65 biggest schools, we call them the Super 5 conferences, SEC, ACC, Pac-10, Big 10, Big 12, basically said, hey, if we don't get more autonomy to be able to spend more money and invest in our programs, without the constraints that a lot of the rules put in place, we'll leave the NCAA. So essentially what the NCAA did, it was sort of took the lid off any controls, any limits on spending that these programs have, okay? And you already have a situation, let's be honest with it. You already have at the top division, there's about 130 schools, football schools, at the top division, and already it's a clear haves versus have-nots. There's no way you can convince me that UAB is anything close to the University of Alabama or Auburn in their football program. But yet they're part of the same division, and they have the same number of scholarships and all those kinds of things. And what this new governance structure, these new rule changes are going to do is it's just going to make it the haves and have-nots, make the gap between the haves and have-nots even greater. And so, UAB is always, has a significant deficit in the athletic department that they're having to fill with student fees and university dollars. That's only going to grow greater. And so in a lot of
John, if I could, and I apologize for interrupting. This is Bob. I'm so enjoying listening to you and Ash along this way. But a great majority of all those schools, even in the power conferences, are operating at deficits.
Correct.
Yeah, so just help us through that just for a moment, because UAB's not alone.
Oh, no. I mean, by the NCAA's own research, there are only about 15 or so schools that operate at a profit. So, you have to think really, really careful about, is this worth it? Given, again, all the standards for what constitutes an education worthy of the 21st century are getting much, much higher, and expectations much higher. And you have to really sit back as an institution and say, is this money well spent? Whether UAB should have eliminated football or maybe just downgraded it and spent less money on it and got down to a lower division, I don't know. But I think they were wise in saying, you know what, that playing at that level, trying to keep up with the Joneses of the SEC schools or Big Ten schools, bigger is not necessarily better. And the idea is to have a program, sponsor a program that fits within the mission of your institution. And that's different for every institution. But I think for schools like Ohio University or Ball State or UAB to continue to try to keep up with the Joneses and sink more and more money into their football program is, quite frankly, irresponsible. At some point, it gets to a point where, what's this about? Is this really about education, or is this about providing entertainment for your community and your campus community? So, I think they were very wise in doing that, because it doesn't. You don't have to have a football program competing at the highest level at tremendous expense to be a world-class university.
Well, now,
and before we go even further,
no, it's all right.
This doesn't even open up the door. We're not even talking about the issue of what should the role of our educational institutions be to sponsor activities that build brain capacity, encourage learning, or should we be sponsoring activities that scramble kids' brains?
Well, and sort of along that same line right there, if I'm correct in understanding it, you even challenge that football specifically is an outdated training tool for the workforce that kids would be going into, and that you're no longer a heavy manufacturing or a leader subjects sort of role in the workforce, and so that a band type creative element actually works better in getting you ready for your life.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, and again, here I'm speaking. We're going back to my book, most recent book, and here I'm concentrating at junior high and high school levels. But what's important to understand when you begin to talk about this and you begin to assess the educational value of football programs versus music programs is this. Football was incorporated into the fabric of our educational institutions, and this was at the late 1800s, early 1900s. It really had nothing to do with education. The driving force behind the incorporation of football into our educational system were the great industrialists of the age, the business people, right? The factory workers and owners, and the great industrialists. And they believed, and probably rightfully so, that football was a great way to socialize and train a largely immigrant workforce to be effective factory workers, preparing them to be able to contribute to the economy that was in existence at the time, which was an industrial economy. It was factory workers. They wanted their factory workers to be physically fit, to be able to work as a team, to not ask many questions. There wasn't much room for lofty thinking on an assembly line, okay? They wanted to be obedient, okay? And probably at the time, football was a great way to train people for an industrial economy. But the fact of the matter is, we no longer live in an industrial economy. We have an economy that it's a global economy. It's interconnected. It's collaborative. It's based on creativity is going to be the currency of the future. And the fact of the matter is, every single issue we face, whether it's as a town, a community, a state, a region, nation, a global community, whether that issue is healthcare, the environment, global politics, whatever it happens to be, in this increasingly fast-paced world in which we live, is going to become more complex. Everything's moving faster, more moving parts. The issues are much more complex and difficult. And in order to effectively address those increasingly complex issues and challenges, we have to develop in our populace a corresponding increase in creativity. And the most effective tool in our educational and community arsenal to teach creativity, to teach thinking out of the box, is music. But yet, whenever it comes down to times, budget crisis, we always cut from extracurricular areas, and it always pits athletics, particularly football, versus music and arts programs. And we have just got to, instead of, and invariably the arts programs are cut while the football program carries on. And all I'm trying to get people to do is rethink that and take an honest look at the relative value and ask the question, are we getting a good return on investment for football versus music programs?
I got one other question for you before we wrap up, sort of an off-topic, but kind of going back to what you first talked about and some of the other things you're involved in. I kind of wanted to ask you a question about the Music for Everyone program that you're in.
Yep.
I was reading some of your background, and I saw where I thought I saw that you actually put pianos out in the streets. Is that sort of how that works? I was really actually fascinated to know more about that.
Right. That's one of our programs that we put out every summer. We put in between probably 10 and 15 fully painted and designed pianos throughout downtown Lancaster, that they're available 24/7 for 4 months. And it's a tremendous community building tool. Literally tens of thousands of magical musical moments occur around those pianos throughout the summer. It's really served to unify our community, and but that's just we do community building, but we also do we do a lot of educational initiatives in the school. But speaking, one last thing I do want to say about the football that we're talking about. I'm not talking about necessarily eliminating football, but what I believe we should do with elite athletics, we are the only country in the nation, only country in the world, that the responsibility for developing elite athletes and teams rests with the educational institutions. Okay, every other country in Europe, for example, if you're a talented kid athletically, you pursue that through a club system, right? It's not, and the role of athletics within the schools is to provide broad-based participation opportunities in activities that can be practiced for a lifetime for reasons of public health in this, one of the most obese nations on the planet. So it's really more about rethinking how we utilize football and elite athletics in our culture and our society to get better returns, both public health returns, but more importantly, even educational returns on that investment.
John Gerdy, this has been a real treat and a very enlightening opportunity for us to have this opportunity first with you today. And John, your book, Ball and Bands, that's your most recent release. We want to get you back here in the weeks to come because I spent 11 years on the air, John, with Paul Feinbaum. Mm-hmm. And love him or hate him, that's the line that goes along. I so appreciated the provocativeness, okay, and not always bashing, not always, but you're raising such incredible questions and putting it out there, and your experiences give you that opportunity, and we really do want to stay in touch with you. And I know, Ash, you may have one last thought, but John, thank you for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you. Yeah, anytime. I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate your willingness to take an honest look at this. It's a difficult issue. It's really, but it's a really important issue that we have to really be honest and take a hard look at.
Now, folks can get your book, Amazon.com, Ball and Bands.
Or bands.
Ball or bands. Yeah.
Or bands, right.
Yeah, right. And so your book's out there. It's not hard to find now in this social media world we have. But again, John Gerdy, Gerdy, Ball or Bands.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'll say I was Bob, when it first showed me the op-ed you wrote, was I think you may have pulled him around a little bit. He was it was more, look what this guy's saying, how dare he.
Well, John.
But I will say that over the last 30 minutes, I've seen a significant change and some nods and some acceptance.
Let's do some more talking. Anytime you guys want me on, I'd be happy to be on. But I do really appreciate your willingness to. A lot of folks who are doing a lot of the sports radio or sports media are sort of wary of this, and I really appreciate your willingness to give it an honest look and give it an honest airing.
John, thank you so much. Our show is called Sports and Stuff, and we try to get into the stuff part, and you've done that. I'm a UAB grad. I'm an athletic guy from the background, and urban studies, the impact of the city. And you and I and Ash, we all know UAB is a vital part of this community, and but the future. And you raised some great points, John. We'll be back with you.
Good, thank you,
John Gerdy. Great interview.